Welcome everybody. Welcome everybody online. Good to see you all. Thank you. Yeah. Uh, there is a famous koan story. Maybe some of you have heard this, maybe not. So I want to start out with it. It's a story about a monk who desires to go on pilgrimage, which was apparently a common thing in ancient China and Japan for monks to do, probably in India as well, where they would leave the temple grounds and go out and not have any destination, any set destination. So this Chinese monk was getting ready to leave. He had been practicing with his teacher for probably a long time, maybe months, maybe years. And he's, okay, I'm going to go out and test my practice in the world, see where I am with it. And his teacher approaches him and asks him where he's going. Don't you think the teacher would know where he's going? He's getting his bags ready. And the monk says, I'm going on pilgrimage. And the teacher asks him, well, what's the purpose? Why? Why are you going on pilgrimage? And the monk responds, I don't know. The teacher says, not knowing is most intimate. Not knowing is most intimate. Isn't that a wonderful thought, right? To not know. We want to know the destination. We're going from A to B. But there's some flaws in that kind of thinking. That's not to say we shouldn't have goals and set them up. That's half of it, though. That's 50%. The other 50% is we don't know where we're going. Actually, we do. Right? Who's not going to nirvana here? And today we're celebrating the nirvana of the Buddha. I think it's the timing, and maybe not all of you. How many of you, raise your hand if you knew Kyoki Roberts? Just a few folks here, maybe a third or a little bit more than a third of the folks here knew Kyoki. She just passed away. She was a teacher here. She was a student of Nonin, and she was instrumental in starting the whole Nebraska Zen Center. Instrumental, absolutely. And she was a dear friend of mine, but also a teacher for me too. I learned so much from her when I was training. And so I feel I owe her a great debt, and it has not yet been paid. I came across this prairie wind. I don't remember where I found it, but I found it somewhere in boxes, maybe, I think. And I remember seeing this when I was in training with my teacher. This is can you guys see that? It's a photo that Nonin, the former abbot here, took of Kyoki as she was going on pilgrimage. And that is the title of Nonin's article here. It's called Pilgrimage. And if you look inside of this particular version of Prairie Wind, Kyoki has her own writing. And Kyoki wasn't much of a writer. I didn't see much of her writing, but this is one of the places that I've seen it. And before I met her in person, this was maybe 1998, it was 1998. I had just started training with my teacher. I was living with her in central Pennsylvania. And actually, I was enamored with the life of my teacher, my own teacher, Diane Banaj. I had met her when I was in college, and I had a very adventurous spirit, but I didn't know how to express it well. When I met my teacher, I saw somebody who was able to express her desires. We just read about getting rid of desires. She was able to express her desires in such a beautiful way. She was a classical ballet dancer until she was in her mid-30s. And then and this was in Japan. She's not Japanese, she was American. She is American. And then she had the karmic conditions to become a nun and live in several Soto Zen temples for the next 12 years of her life. And this was in the 70s and 80s. And she shared stories about her life, being raised in central Pennsylvania, how she became a ballet dancer, going to college, her family losing. They had become bankrupt. They lost their home, a beautiful home in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania, the home of Bucknell University, where I went to school and later met her. Had a beautiful home in Lewisburg, and they weren't able to hold on to it for various reasons. It was in the family, but they lost it. And then she married a very wealthy businessman, and was not happy. Was not happy in that relationship. She was encouraged. She was pushed by her family because they were just on the cusp of losing everything. You will be saved by going to this man. And it's not that she didn't care about him, but as she said to me personally, she said to me that at least at that time, now they're friends now, but at that time she felt that he cared more about his money than she did about him, about her. And she lasted in the marriage for 6 years, but during that time they went to Japan because he was traveling to find outlets to sell his product. And one of those places was Japan. And that's what brought her what brought her to Japan in the first place. So it's thanks to her ex-husband. And when I met her in Bucknell at the university, one of the things she told me that just blew my mind was that you can have a lot of money and not be happy, and you can have next to nothing and be content. Now, one of the versions of the last teachings of the Buddha says exactly that. With the nirvana, upon his passing away, the Buddha is saying you can have a lot of wealth and be unhappy. You can live simply and be content. When I heard that message from my teacher, she had actually lived it. She had lived that. And I was really impressed because she had access to loads of resources at one point, and then decided that was not the path that she was going to stay on, left it, and eventually made her way, after many, many years, 10 years afterwards, became a nun and expressed the delight of that particular lifestyle, living very simply. And she would go on the alms rounds, right? This is what Kyoki's doing. She would go on the alms rounds, and part of the tradition was to beg for food. And you do that in two ways in Japan. First of all, it's a noble begging. We don't understand begging like that in this country. We have a very pejorative view of begging and beggars. They don't work hard, there's mental illness and that kind of thing. That is not what I'm talking about. And the way that I wanted to know, what is this? So I went to Japan and I got to experience begging. Like, how do you do that? And there's a whole ceremony around begging. You wear your robes a certain special way. You put on a conical hat so that people don't see your face. You hold your begging bowl, and you go in a line, several other monks with you, but in front and behind you. And it's like, as one of the nuns that I practiced with at Manakuri Zendo, a Japanese nun, she said, it's like trick or treat. You go to one house, you knock on their door, ring the doorbell, somebody comes, may offer you something, maybe nobody comes. And then you go on to the next house, and you kind of leapfrog like that. One monk goes to one place, and then you go to the next place, and like that. So but I hadn't experienced that, and I wanted to experience, like, what is that like? Because we don't do that here. You don't see monks on the road necessarily. You don't see monks on the road, right? We don't see monks traveling around to practice like this story I shared. Another way is that you might be given permission, special permission if you're living in a monastery, to go out and beg. And that was, so my teacher experienced the alms round, called the alms rounds, like I just mentioned, where you go in a line and you go from house to house like that. And she always taught me that the purpose of that is to not get attached to when you receive something, a boon, and to not get discouraged if you don't receive something, or even if you get insulted or pushed away. It's the practice is to develop equanimity regardless of what comes to you. That's the practice, is to develop that kind of equanimity, equal seeing, and to see the emptiness of the gift. When I say emptiness, I don't mean that again in a pejorative sense, but from a Buddhist perspective. Emptiness means the whole universe is in that gift, whether it's something that you like or you don't like, right? So we see it equally. That's the practice. Do we see it equally? No. We like it when we get something good, and we don't like it when we get something bad. I don't care how enlightened you are. And so you recognize, okay, I'm not there yet, but you can pretend, right? We can all put on a good face. Oh yes, thank you very much. I didn't like that. We try, we practice, and maybe sometimes we can get it. But usually not. In any case, my teacher was given special permission because her teacher told her when he ordained her that his temple, they didn't have any money and he couldn't support her. And she would have to support herself by trusting the alms of the people of Japan. He told her point blank, if that's what she wanted to do, if she wanted to ordain, he couldn't support her financially. She would have to learn how to support herself by going on the alms rounds. And so in order to, this is a side story, she didn't trust that she would be supported by the universe at first. Maybe still even today, but at least at first she didn't. It really showed up in a strong way where she had, prior to ordaining, part of her livelihood included teaching English. That's how she could do ballet as well as earn a living. So she taught English on the side. And after she had a job teaching English, and she arranged for that job to be continued even after she ordained, and her teacher didn't know about it. And then she said to her teacher, I have this job, and he was really upset that she had not trusted that the universe will take care of you. But he said, okay, you've committed to doing this, now you're going to have to do it. So she was kind of feeling bad about herself for having done that, but she said, okay, I'm going to go do it. And she made a bunch of money teaching English. And at the end of that, she had been given the money from that class. Not all of it was for her, though. She had to return some of it to the school that she was working for, but she was given trust to hold on to this money. At the end of this it was like a 1-month teaching spree in teaching English. And what happened was she stored the money in her room, and what happened?
I bet it disappeared.
It disappeared. Somebody had stolen it. Somebody knew that she was given a lot of money, and it was only a third of it was hers. So she had to end up paying back the rest that she lost there and not get reimbursed for it. And her teacher was on her case for that. See, I told you, this is what happens. You messed up. You didn't trust me. So she was given permission after a long time of training to go out on her own and go on the alms round to receive the amount of money, because the nuns were all responsible for paying their own health insurance. In Japan, there's universal health care, but you have to pay it, and everybody pays the same amount, and you have to pay what you need. And she would say, I went out there once a month. My teacher gave me this is her, Oyama Roshi, gave her permission once a month, one day a month, to go out on the alms round so that she could collect enough money to pay for her health insurance. And she didn't have a sign saying, I need money for health insurance. She had her bell, a little hand bell that she'd ring, and she would chant sutras or, oh. Mm. And she said that every month, every day that the one day that she did that of the whole month, she would get exactly the amount that she needed. I would, as a college student, listening to these stories, I was absolutely flabbergasted because I had been taught something very different growing up. All of us have been taught something very different. It's a different economic system. Very different. And it just blew my mind that somebody lived like that for as long as she did. It's not without issues, right? That particular lifestyle is not without issues, and it's very difficult in many, many ways. And I haven't lived it. I can't say that I've lived that particular lifestyle because I grew up in the United States, and most of my practice has been in the United States. But hearing the stories was very inspirational to me, and I desired to know how to do that. I remember a Catholic priest saying to the congregation, this was many years ago, he said, he remarked on the story of Jesus and the disciples, and how simply they lived. And he said, but you can't do that in the United States. Mm-hmm. And I thought about that, and I said, well, wait a minute, she did that in Japan, and she's trying to continue that process in America. I want to learn from her. I was really enamored in her journey. When I saw this newsletter, I saw Kyoki, and she was doing it. She decided she was going to go out and go on alms, and she didn't have a particular purpose. She says, in the morning, this is Kyoki, in the morning. Oh, wait a minute, let's see. Let me go to the beginning. She says, I had learned to beg in Japan, like my teacher. I had learned to beg in Japan, following a many centuries old tradition. Shopkeepers and farmers came out to give money and food when they heard us ringing our bells and chanting. That's amazing. So she's referring back to this tradition that goes back centuries in Japan, in China, in India. She said she learned this in Japan. She says, when traveling with Judy, Judy was just here at the funeral yesterday. She was a Christian minister. When traveling with Judy, I had tried begging the same way in a small Kansas town, only to have the local police officer stop me to ask what I was doing. He said that I had lit up the switchboard down at the office. People had given me money when I explained what I was doing, but it seemed wrong to alarm a small community the way I had. Was there a different way? I continued to ponder this right up to the day I left. So she had done this prior, and now she was planning to do it again. I have to admire her courage for wanting to go out on pilgrimage in the Midwest, only based on what she had experienced in Japan and the stories that she had read, like the one I shared at the beginning, right? That this was a part of Zen practice for centuries. I can't imagine the courage and nobody knowing. See, at least in Japan, they know what you're about when you're wearing a conical hat and robes, but here in this country, people get confused and the police officer is worried. And if you say you're begging, you're thinking, you're thought of as indigent, mental illness, and all those kinds of pejoratives. So it's a different experience. Now, here's a part that I found really interesting about what Kyoki wrote. In the koan that I shared about not knowing is most intimate, it talks about, he asks his student, where are you going? The student says, I don't know. And the teacher says, not knowing is most intimate. There's something really important about this not knowing. And Kyoki realizes something big here. She says, in the morning, my friend Genevieve, with whom I stayed last night, walks me to the end of the first road. I turn and head south, understanding the ramifications of the decision I've made, if not totally the cause. I sense, so at the beginning, she didn't have a clear destination, but she made the decision now. She made a decision to go somewhere. She says, I sense that the pilgrimage is different because there is a direction to it. Right? She decided to go south. And she's, no longer will I take a road because it looks interesting, but because it will take me where I now want to go. Isn't that interesting? Right? No longer will I take a road because it looks interesting. So when you're on pilgrimage, kind of like in this very literal way, I don't know where I'm going. I'm just putting one foot in front of the other. I'm open to this great mystery around me. I'm dazzled by everything, and I'm just following what attracts me. Right? That's the pilgrimage. Which, oh wow, just the whole universe opens up. But as soon as you create I'm here at A, I'm going to B, the universe shrinks down into your course. No longer will I take a road because it looks interesting, but because it will take me where I want to go. I have imposed a set of directions on the walk, and the possibilities have been infinitely diminished. Wow. So as soon as we do that, as soon as we create this goal, we get infinitely. And on a practical level with Zazen, as soon as we do that too. We do that in everything we do. We're setting up goals. That's okay, but we gotta, the spirit behind it is to release that goal and open up to the moment, right? Just what you're experiencing as you're sitting. Well, there is I think I'll close with this. There's a chant when you go to Japan and you practice and you go on pilgrimage. There's a chant you say when you receive something from somebody. Zai ho nisei kudoku mujo dambara mitsu gusoku emman naishi hokkai byodo ryaku. So that translates, a literal translation, Zai ho. Zai means material goods, ho means the Dharma or spiritual goods. Nisei, ni, two. Ichi, ni, sanji. Ni is two. Sei means worlds. Two worlds. Kudoku mujo. Kudoku means the merit. Mujo, beyond limit. Dambaramitsu means the perfection of giving. Dana is giving. Paramita is perfection. Dambaramitsu. Gusoku emman naishi hokkai byodo ryaku. Byodo has to do with equality. And this whole statement, gusoku enman naishi hokkai byodo, interpenetrating and equal. So if you put those all together and make it into English sense, it's something like material and spiritual worlds. The material and the spiritual worlds mutually support each other, mutually interpenetrate each other. Right? You can't have the material world without the spiritual world. And this gives, we need spiritual teachings and we need the material resources. Both of them are equally important. That's how, it's not one is better than the other. They support each other. We need both. And just to say maybe a couple of final words about Kyoki and just her, she gave so much of her own material resources. This center would not be here if it wasn't for her generosity. She had a lot of money in stocks that she liquidated so that this building could be purchased. And she had to, at some point, let go of the outcome. Some of you know that knew her, it was not an easy process for her to let go of the outcome. She wanted things to be a different way than they turned out. And she had to let go of all of the expectations. Can you imagine giving so much of her money to support the Zen Center and then having to let go of the outcome? And that's another really strong aspect of this practice is we give without necessarily, we all have expectations. We give in order to get a certain result. That's what we do. Certainly when we work, we want to receive just payment. That's natural. But our practice is to work at least to work at, no, we don't have to be perfect at it, but just to work at giving without the expectation of outcome. That's the hard practice. When I first read Kyoki's writings here, I wanted to meet her and I wanted to walk with her, and I thought maybe someday. But I had the great opportunities, several opportunities to be with her, you know, and to hear her teachings. I had several opportunities after meeting her. And when my teacher met her for the first time, she sent me here to Nebraska Zen Center because she wanted me to train with Nonin, because she knew Nonin was good for Kyoki and etc. So I did that for 3 months before I ordained. And it was a very transformative experience. But being with Kyoki, I could see there's other ways to teach. Nonin was very gruff and strong and straightforward, as was Kyoki. But Kyoki had this tremendous compassion, at least that's what I felt from her. And it was different than the way that my own teacher taught. So she taught me that there's many ways to teach. There's many ways to teach, and you can teach with a lot of love, a lot of care, a sense of everybody is welcome. And that's how I felt from her. So I always really appreciated that. I will miss her greatly. I will miss her greatly. So this Dharma talk is really dedicated to her. I have a little poem here I'll close with, and then we have some time for questions, or we can take it outside. A bright light shines, Kyoki. The sun gives without concerns, then fades, Kyoki. When you eat, I'm full. When I give, I receive. Let us feast on dessert. Thank you, Kyoki. And thank you, dear Sangha. Thank you so much for your practice. We just have a minute left. I don't want to keep people. I know if you have to go, please do. But if you have any comments you'd like to make or questions, you can share them now, or we could also talk outside after the talk is over. You guys too online, please.
Hi.
Yeah.
So my name's Monty. I was wondering if you had any advice about just grieving in general, because my mom died in June and I've just been feeling extra sad lately. So maybe I guess you're going through it too. So I was wondering if you had any advice.
We have a lot of shame around grieving, and just know that it's totally okay to do that, whether it's public, whether it's private. If you are able to shed tears, never be ashamed of that. Otherwise, what happens is it gets caught in our body. Grief is an energy like any other energy. It's empty. Yet we have to feel it. It has to move. The only way it moves through us is if we feel it and allow it to express itself. I'm not in charge of grief. You're not in charge of grief. None of us are. It happens when it happens, and we just got to let it flow. Our society doesn't always welcome it, and it's very uncomfortable to be around people who are grieving. We want to comfort them, but actually we want to not feel bad. So the practice is really to sit with the discomfort of the grief and allow it to flow through us, just like any kind of energy. And when you allow yourself to fully grieve, you don't grieve anymore. But that takes time, and grief comes in waves. Sometimes, especially at least for me, immediately after a death. For some people, especially relatives that I'm close with, the waves may be stronger, but the sitting practice itself stabilizes us. So sit with a sangha, sit in the company of others. That will help to settle you. It's these, we have these mental waves that are kind of like at the top of the ocean, but if we sit, we get in touch with the lower parts of our body. And that's what we want to focus on down there. It's not that we try to get rid of the grief. We don't want to push it away. It'll go by itself, but let it flow, right? It doesn't, but I think our issue is that we get caught. We think we're not supposed to grieve. We're seen as weak if we do. That is not a sign. Grieving is not a sign of weakness. It's like the old woman in that story, the old enlightened grandma, in China, her granddaughter died at a young age, and she cried bitterly in front of people, and it caused the community to think, oh, well, maybe she's not enlightened. And one of the people in the community approached her and said, "Why are you crying? We thought you were enlightened." And she said, "Oh, you idiot! I'm crying because I am." We have these bizarre ideas of what enlightenment is. It's just this, and we're here. Why are we trying to do something else? But you got to try, right? You got to deal with it. We look stupid. That's part of the practice, is looking stupid and being okay with that. Right? You got to be okay with looking a little stupid. It's just the surface. Sit with it. Trust the universe. Trust the sangha. That's why we're here. And when you see people grieving, you got to find out from them what they need. Don't assume they need comfort. Don't assume somebody who's grieving needs comfort. The grief itself is the comfort for if you really allow yourself to do it. It's very comforting, and it's normal. It's part of being alive. Thank you for that question.
Thank you.
All right, George, shall we do it?
We can move our cushions back to where they were before.
Okay, yes. All right, so we'll close with 3 bows. Please join us. Thanks. Thank you.